afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Sutta study. As usual, we're going to begin with just a few minutes of silent meditation together. It's about 10 minutes as we arrive and get settled. I'm sorry I'm a little bit late today, but so good for me to have a minute to settle too. We'll just sit silently. And I'll ring the bell in a few minutes. Oh. Again, Namo Buddhaya, and welcome to our Sutta study program this afternoon. I want to say Happy Easter. I forgot this morning. This is something that was meaningful to me at an earlier stage of my life, and it's a little strange that I could entirely forget today, but you know, if it's meaningful to you, then Happy Easter. And if it's not, also Happy Easter. No reason not to be happy about it. You know, even though we're Buddhist and we're trying to give people some idea about Buddhist holidays and traditions and so forth, still we do want to recognize those things that shape our lives more generally in this culture and this country where we are. And if I'd thought ahead a little more, I would have done something a little more Easter themed for our Sutta study today. But I didn't think ahead, so I have a different topic. And a lot of the time, either you can find some way to connect them. It's like, oh, here's how I'm going to fit this theme into Easter. But today I'm not sure about. Maybe we'll find it over the course of our discussion. What is the connection? So what I wanted to talk about today is a topic that I myself have been contemplating and that I'm sort of still in the midst of contemplating to understand how these teachings can work more deeply in my own practice. And so I thought, well, I want to say that at the beginning because I don't feel like I know all the answers about this one, but I want to talk about it with you, and we can share our discussion and investigation of this topic. So the topic I wanted to talk about today is called Hiri Otapa. These are two qualities that the Buddha describes. One is Hiri, one is Otapa, and they're called the guardians of the world, the protectors of the world, these bright qualities that protect the world. And so that sounds pretty good. So then you want to know what they mean. And they're hard to translate. They're hard to translate in a way that doesn't make them sound kind of dark and depressing. The traditional or earliest translations into English that got popular were moral shame and moral dread. So shame and dread don't sound that great. They don't sound like things that we really want to be developing in ourselves. We want to have less shame and less dread in our lives, most of us. This is because of the connotation of the English words, right? Another way that they're translated, which I put in the title of my talk that I announced today, is conscience and prudence. Sounds maybe a little bit better. Still not a lot to get excited about, like, yes, let me be more prudent. But at least a little bit less negative. And, you know, it's been debated a lot what the proper translation of these should be. There's a whole paper I've been reading that like lists all the different translations that people have given. I'll share that link with you in a minute. But let's go for a minute to see what the Buddha says about these qualities and why we would consider them to be guardians of the world, and why we might want to develop them. Let me find my sutta just a moment. Here we go. All right. So, conscience and prudence, Hiri Otapa. Mendicants, when there is no conscience and prudence, Yeri otapa, one who lacks conscience and prudence has destroyed a vital condition for sense restraint. When there is no sense restraint, one who lacks sense restraint has destroyed a vital condition for ethical conduct. When there is no ethical conduct, one who lacks ethics has destroyed a vital condition for right immersion. That's samadhi, concentration. When there is no right immersion, one who lacks right immersion has destroyed a vital condition for true knowledge and vision. When there is no true knowledge and vision, one who lacks true knowledge and vision has destroyed a vital condition for disillusionment and dispassion. When there is no disillusionment and dispassion, one who lacks disillusionment and dispassion has destroyed a vital condition for knowledge and vision of freedom. Suppose there was a tree that lacked branches and foliage. Its shoots, bark, softwood, and hardwood would not grow to fullness. In the same way, and he repeats, when there is no conscience and prudence, a person who lacks conscience and prudence has destroyed a vital condition for all these other healthy qualities to grow. And we go to another sutta, just a moment. Okay. All right. So these are also considered part of the, these two qualities are part of the 5 powers of a trainee, who is somebody who is training on the path. And so they're included in the list that will be in this sutta. Mendicants, sentient beings, are mostly charmed by sensual pleasures. When a gentleman has abandoned the scythe and flail and gone forth from the lay life to homelessness, they're qualified to be called a faithful renunciate from a good family. Why is that? Because the youth can get sensual pleasures of this kind or that. Now, all sensual pleasures are just reckoned as sensual pleasures, regardless of whether they're inferior, average, or superior. Suppose there was a little baby boy who, because of his nursemaid's negligence, puts a stick or stone in his mouth. The nursemaid would very quickly notice and try to take it out. If that didn't work, she'd cradle his head with her left hand and take it out using a hooked finger of her right hand, even if it drew blood. Why is that? She'd know, this will distress the child. There's no denying. Still, it should be done by a nursemaid who wants what's best for him out of kindness and sympathy. And when the boy has grown up and has enough sense, then his nursemaid would not be concerned about him thinking anymore, thinking the boy can look after himself. He won't be negligent. He won't swallow things he shouldn't swallow. So the Buddha says, in the same way, like the nursemaid, I still need to look after a mendicant who hasn't finished developing faith, conscience, prudence, energy, and wisdom regarding skillful qualities, because they might swallow something they shouldn't. But when a mendicant has finished developing faith, conscience, prudence, energy, and wisdom regarding skillful qualities, I need not be concerned, thinking they can look after themselves. They won't be negligent. We need these qualities. We need faith, conscience, prudence, energy, and wisdom in order to be able to train ourselves, in order to take care of ourselves, in order to not put bad things in our mouths. So then, what exactly are these qualities? As Lahiri, we can say conscience, shame, but it's not shame after the fact. It's not thinking about all the bad things you did in your life and saying like, oh, I'm so bad. I'm so ashamed of all the bad things I did in my life. It's more shame in the sense of like, well, we think it's bad to have shame, but we also think it's bad to be shameless, right? If somebody is shameless, then that's a negative judgment on them. Or somebody does something sort of shocking, then we say, "Have you no shame?" Right? Why do we say that? Does anyone have any thoughts about this? This sort of positive and negative aspects of shame. Is it that we want them to feel really bad all their lives? Don't you know? Have an answer in the room here. I'll give her the mic.
Thank you, Venerable. Is it because it's kind of that middle path idea? We don't want to just be walking around making a fool of ourselves and our families and our group, our crew we're with, but also we don't want to be beating ourselves up because that doesn't help us either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to, it's that middle path, right? Have some pride in how you're carrying yourself and do right, but go easy on yourself too. I don't know. I've got the microphone. I can't.
Yeah, keep it in case anyone else back there wants to talk later. Yeah, no, I think you actually pointed to something that's part of, well, what they say that the proximate cause for hiri, sometimes translated as shame, if not conscience, the proximate cause is self-respect. If you respect yourself, you won't do the things that are going to be harmful to yourself. That's what you were saying about like, knowing how you need to act in a group as you're you're representing somebody or something, even if you're just representing yourself and your own opinion of like, I'm the kind of person who doesn't do that kind of thing, right? And we're not at the far end of the path here. We're not at the point of sort of giving up identification with any kind of self, right? Um, this conscience and prudence comes near the beginning, but it's a foundation. And it's and it is this self-respect of like, oh, because I respect myself, I won't do that. And you have a kind of disgust about it, actually. Like you look at some action that you might be tempted to take. Maybe it looks like it would be fun. Maybe it looks like, everybody else is doing it. You have some sort of sense like, no, I don't want to do that. Um, and this is something that can change and develop over time. When I was contemplating this topic, one memory that came to my mind is, when I was a kid, I went with my parents to the desert, and there were little horned lizards running around, and they're really cool. You can like go grab pick one up, and you can, if you flip it over and you like stroke its belly, it falls asleep in your hand. It's so cool if you're 10 years old that you go grab this lizard and you stroke its belly and it falls asleep in your hand. Um, and then many years later, I was going hiking in the desert with some friends. I was an adult. I had started practicing the Buddha's path, and we saw some little horned lizards. And I was telling my friends, you know what happens if you pick one of those up and you stroke its belly? And I said, it falls asleep in your hand. It's so cool. And they said, well, show us. And something in me stopped. I was like, wait, no, I'm going to traumatize that little lizard. That's a stress response. That is a stress response at this part of the lizard. And I thought it was cool when I was 10, but here and now at this time, it's like, oh, actually, ew, I don't want to do that. And I don't blame myself as a 10-year-old. I don't feel like, oh, why did I do that when I was 10? But I was, I guess, I don't know, late 20s or something at this point. And I was like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to create intentionally a stress response in this small being for my own entertainment. Um, and it stopped me, and I didn't. Uh, and so that's an example for me of, that was an instance of hiri, of just like, I wouldn't do that. Um, I don't know if anyone else has something that they can think of that's like that for them, where they're just like, oh, I don't want to do that. Any examples? Daniel, yeah?
One of them venerable. My mom kind of on and off practiced some sort of version of Hindu spirituality when I was young, and I think ahimsa, non-harming was part of that practice as well. And so growing up, when there were bugs in the house that were unappealing, you would catch them in a cup and put paper over the cup and then throw them outside,
Mhm.
and they'd go be in the world. And so growing up, that was just what you did. It never occurred to me that you would squish a bug. And
Yeah.
so I remember when I was 19 or 20, I was at a friend's house and there's a big spider on the wall and everybody's having a reaction to it. And so I said, "Oh, I got it. I'll take care of it. Don't worry." And I went into the kitchen and I got a cup and I started the process and everybody looked at me like I was crazy. And it was then that I realized, oh, most people just crush bugs. It had never occurred to me that that's something that was an option. So I've always been kind of grateful that my mom sort of normalized that for me when I was young.
Hmm. Yeah, so that too, that's wonderful. Yeah, definitely. That's something that we uh, recommend as Buddhists. That's part of your five precepts. And but it is for a lot of people, it's a change, it's a shift for them when they start practicing with five precepts and they don't squish bugs anymore. That's an adjustment for a lot of people. Um, and for me too, we used to take spiders out in the cup when I was a kid, but you could squish an ant or you could swat a mosquito, right? I've definitely spotted mosquitoes in this life, um, but I don't anymore. Uh, and it's a change, it's a shift. It's a shift that comes in part from just being like, I'm not a person who would do that. Because I've accepted this practice of the five precepts that I'm just not going to do it anymore. It's and it stops you. Um, Definitely. I think maybe I've told this story before, but I do remember a shift for myself in this regard. Also, as I started practicing with the five precepts, it's sort of similar to my lizard story, actually. I guess I, had something to work out there. But yeah, I had been traveling in Guatemala and up in the hills, and the people there, they have the dragonfly season. And in the dragonfly season, they take a stick that has like a bunch of twigs and leaves on the end, and they take that and they swat the dragonflies out of the air. And then that's considered really good nutrition. And, in a place where they don't have like good protein access all the time. Then in the dragonfly season, you have this bounty of protein. And you see the kids out there and they'd be, swatting the dragonflies out of the air. Um, And for me at that time when I saw it, it was like, oh, this is an interesting cultural practice. And good for them that they get the protein and what a fun thing for the kids. Um, and then later I was telling this story about my travels to somebody who was practicing with five precepts. And his reaction to it was just like, oh, I don't know what I would do if I saw people just like swatting little beings. Oh, he had this really reaction to it. Where and I hadn't been swatting the dragonflies myself, and I didn't eat any dragonflies, but I was sort of like, oh, this is cool. And he was like, oh. And now I look back at it and I also sort of have that feeling about it, like the I you know I not to blame or shame the people, but just on a personal level, like I wouldn't, that's my sense, I wouldn't do that, not anymore. Any other examples? You have the mic.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, it seems like number one has always been easy for me, but when it comes to, I guess, when it's not a moral or ethical decision, like I'm not going to inflict harm on somebody else, but when it's for me, it's more like number five, addiction. And the old habits and cravings, right? All the causes and conditions that have and over time have created these habits. It's where do you and that just keeps coming up, and I'll get several months or even a couple years of doing good, and then it kind of resurfaces. So how do you kind of figure out how to get around that, where I'm not squishing the bug, but essentially I'm squishing myself, my own practice? How does one figure that out?
Yeah, no, definitely. Some of these will be sort of easier for people than others. And, I guess, uh, and part of why I am myself in a mode of contemplating this is that I see some things that I do myself that I can recognize on some level are not wholesome. And, it's not like the squishing bugs and it's not like the big high level crimes or whatever, but the unwholesome mental attitudes that I still hold, my reactivity with other people sometimes, things like this. And like from looking at it from the outside, I can be like, oh yes, that's unskillful behavior. I'd like to stop that. But still there's something inside that doesn't quite connect, that doesn't that somehow I don't have that same like sense of disgust or about it, at least not at the time when it's happening. And so then that's something I've been wanting to contemplate and have been contemplating and don't have the answer for yet fully. um, but I think, it's some of it like the precepts do their own work. Like I never, um, well, if I think back, like something that's interesting about living in Sonoma County is that it's, the wine industry is like the main thing around here. And like the university just up the road, all of the dorms are named after different kinds of wine. And it's very interesting. Um, and the first time I ever came to Sonoma County actually was on a wine country tour with some friends in graduate school. One of my friends, her father was a winemaker, and she invited us up, and we went around to all the places. And one of the places we went to is actually like on the road in between uh, our forest hermitage and the place where we go for propane and uh, errands and things in town. We always drive past this one winery that I went to on my wine tour years before I entered monastic life or knew anything about Buddhism. And I always just have this sense of like cognitive dissonance about it. It's like, yes, I did that before. And in a way, that was like a happy, fun memory of my youth. And I don't hate myself for having done that. And I don't hate the people that I traveled with. They were, still people I think fondly of and so forth. But it's also like, yeah, I wouldn't go there anymore. And I actually feel weird about, driving around this county and seeing, all the vineyards. Like they're beautiful. But if you think about what does that vineyard mean and what is that doing in the world, like there's worse things, but it's not something to put your whole life and livelihood into. Um, and so that's a change for me to sort of it's not like a rejecting the people and blaming and saying, oh, we should outlaw alcohol and or whatever. But I do have this little sense of ooh when I drive by all of that or when I think about that, and that's something that has developed in me since practicing with these precepts over time. And partially it's because, okay, well, I'm a monastic, right? I'm wearing the robes. If I walk into a winery and and ask for, give me a round of tasting round, whatever they call that. Um, that looks bad, right? It's a bad look for a monastic if I do that. And part of it is the protection of the robes that I'm now wearing these robes, and I can't do that kind of thing. Or you know, or every once in a while, as a monastic, I'm in the car with some lay people who's, you know, they start out good and they're asking their Dhamma questions and so forth, but eventually it goes into conversation about some reality TV show and 90 Day Fiance. I learned more than I ever thought I would need to know about 90 Day Fiance by sitting in a car with some lay friends one time. And I do have this sort of sense of like, I shouldn't be part of this conversation. In the robes, I should not be part of this conversation. It's fine. They can talk about what they want to talk about, but it's like, okay, I'm just going to be quiet now because this is not my conversation. And so I can see these things that have developed in me over time with this kind of stuff. And I also see the ways in which it's still lacking. But I think it's sort of gradually, it's like creating this sense of like, just somehow I'm not a person who does that. That I can be better and stronger than that. It requires a faith in yourself that you can change, that you don't have to do that. And like, then where does that faith come from, or what's getting in the way of that current faith? Like, what is blocking you and giving the doubt that you're not capable of being that person who doesn't do that anymore. And yeah, I don't know. I was asking another teacher about that a few days ago. Like, where do you get that faith if you don't already have it? That confidence that it's possible to change. I said, well, let's think about psychotherapy. Or he also said everything that's in psychotherapy is also in the Dhamma. So, yeah, you need to be able to have some control over your thoughts. Have to have some metta for yourself. Have to have some, faith in the path. Faith is one of these powers of the trainee that he just mentioned. Faith that it's possible to walk this path then is, that's supporting your conscience and your prudence, and then also your energy and your wisdom. You also have to have wisdom to know what you should have a conscience about. Some things are, I think it's kind of like the Buddha did this a lot. He sort of took some naturally occurring human psychological stuff and turned it towards good ends. So whatever it is in humans that makes us snobs, that makes us think like, oh, I'm not going to consume that kind of cultural thing because that's what those other people I don't like do, and I'm not one of those people, right? Like, even in my lay life, maybe I would have been a snob about 90 Day Fiance, but maybe not about other kinds of prestige television. Yes, I'm a cultured person, right? That's just snobbery. But it's that kind of thing of like taking this human tendency to be like, okay, I'm not in the category of people who does that, and like taking out hopefully the unwholesome aspects of that, which are the judgment and the like overly strong attachment to some sort of identity around it, but keeping the whatever it is that is protective within that sort of sense that like you're drawing a boundary, like of your own behavior, using this like innate human system, but turning it towards something that's good and worthwhile, and not just about like what kind of TV show do you like or not, what kind of whatever is your kind versus the other person's kind. Okay. See. Any other comments here? Richard, yes.
Thank you, Aya. There's something odd about these translations, both this Bhikkhu Sujato translation and Bhikkhu Bodhi. The word is asati, but Sujato is just translating it as no. So before those, in the first one, what is it? Conscience and prudence. I'm not looking at it right now, but and in Bhikkhu Bodhis, it's moral shame and moral dread.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see in the Pali, it begins with asati, and then later on, when it's affirmed, it's called it's sati, and Bhikkhu Bodhi translates that as a sense, rather than mindfulness. No mindfulness and mindfulness, and Sujato just goes right past it into conscience and prudence. So I'm not sure why they're not paying attention to the fact that sati is there, because it seems more like he's saying you have to have mindfulness.
Right.
A person has no mindfulness of these things, or then later, you really should have mindfulness of these things.
Right.
Anyways, that's just one technical point I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, well, let me answer that one. So asati, yes, sati is mindfulness and asati is non-mindfulness, but it also has another meaning, which is just existing or not existing. And I think that's the one that's here. So this is the first one, the past participle, when it isn't or when not existing. So that's when there is no conscience and prudence. So asati, there is no hiriotapa. I think that's what is the meaning of sati and asati in this particular case. But
I'm not saying that that's wrong according to that dictionary translation, but if you look carefully at the way it's pulling apart the Pali, there's a lot more to like missing letters that they're kind of inferring. Na, ase, nat, ta, ti, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? It's like a lot of juggling and everything, when Buddha really stresses all the time mindfulness. So it'd be much, I'm just saying, in my opinion, it would be much simpler, which, below it says sarti, nasarti. Well, it's, I think it comes from sarati, like Sanskrit or something, is the sati is the word, and that's kind of what they're alluding to there. Anyways, but anyway, that was just one thing I wanted to bring up. But the other thing is that there's a way to look at these 7 items. There's actually 2 ways. There's the noble disciple, and then there's the one who's not attained noble disciple yet. So it says, when there's no sense of moral shame, right? Well, I'm more interested in the positive of these. So if you're if you're a what do they call it, like a loving confidence follower, which I believe is more like loving friendship, a metta follower, right? By kind of supporting the Sangha and the Buddha and the Dharma, you'll begin to develop this sense of moral shame, right? And then you'll become a confidence follower who then takes up the precepts, 5 or more, depending on the individual. And then, so that's the second one, you take restraint, right? And then the next one is virtuous behavior. Well, Buddha says that as a Dharma follower, you should go and associate with other Buddhists, especially if you can, with noble attainers, and then learn the Dharma and everything from them. And there's a sutta where Buddha actually says that activity is also a type of samadhi, because you're concentrating on the Dharma. So that's number 4, right? You're going to concentration. And from that activity, you'll penetrate through to the Dharma, and that's number 5. The knowledge and visions of things as they really are, will appear to you. So you'll become a sotapan, commonly known as stream enter, but as I usually say, I prefer hearing enterer, because that's what you were doing. You were hearing the Dharma, and then it suddenly clicked and made, penetrative sense to you. And then from there, you'll develop, according to Bhikkhu Bodhi, disenchantment and dispassion. And so this is where you have right intention, And if you ever read the expanded description of these things, right, you won't have you'll have harmlessness and all these other things, and that'll lead into right speech. You won't tell lies or do other things like that, right? Because you get detached from worldly activity, and you want to really maintain this high level. And then you'll also very strictly follow the first three of the precepts, and that leads into right livelihood, which is also you restrict your livelihood, especially if you're monastic and you control your senses and everything, to have that, and then you go on and develop right effort, only doing skillful and not unskillful things, and then you begin to control your mind through contemplation of mindfulness of various things, and that leads into samadhi, right? And each one of those phases, you're kind of like detaching yourself more and more and getting more and more dispassion about the things of the world that you're developing along those lines. And that finally culminates in the 2 stages beyond the Eightfold Path of usually called supramundane stages, right? Knowledge and vision and nibbana, like that. So anyways, I'm saying that's one way to look at it, starting from the beginning, but you can also kind of reestablish that beginning, right, at just stream entry or hearing entry itself, right? Because then it follows that similar type of thing where, you because of your vision, you begin to control your intention and all your restraint of your faculties and everything. You develop, virtuous behavior, right? Right, livelihood and following all the precepts and those things of the first 5 path factors, which ultimately leads up to, it also includes 6 and everything. And then you get right concentration, the 8th path factor, which develops a certain amount of knowledge and vision. And that allows you to then do a much more subtle but powerful disenchantment and everything. And again, that leads to those 2 super mundane factors, which are past the Eightfold Path, which actually lead you on to nibbana. So anyways, that's just my view, but I thought it might be interesting to see that, it's possible, that there are like these patterns that Buddha is using and explaining them kind of like in slightly different languages and stuff, but they keep following the same kind of sequence of events.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you very much for listening.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, I saw a minute ago a hand up from Ryan. Do you still want to say something?
Yes, hi, thank you. Good afternoon. I was just posting my questions on the chat. Not sure if you're able to see it, but just curious about that timeline thing. It just seemed like the message really, the sutta is about keeping sila.
Yeah.
I was just curious on where that where this particular sutta would fit in the timeline of the teachings of the Buddha. That was all. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if you mean like in terms of the Buddha's life, or in terms of like where in the gradual path. In terms of the Buddha's life, I'm not sure. I think these are things that pop up throughout the Buddha's teaching here and there. There's quite a number of suttas that mention them again and again in different places, different times. But in terms of like where it fits into the broad vision of the Buddha's gradual training, the gradual path to awakening, it's near the beginning. It's one of those foundational things that this is, even before you've committed to a practice of sila, right? Even before, like in this sutta that we just saw, it comes first, before the commitment to sila, to ethics. It becomes before sense restraint. And it's like it's the basis for those things is that you have to have some idea that like I want to be one way and not another. And yeah, it can work on many levels, right? It can begin just with like even, you know, I want to stay out of prison. This is the other half of it, right? So there's hiri, which is the proximate cause for hiri is self-respect. We didn't get to otapa yet. Otapa, they say the proximate cause is respect for others, or else one way it's translated is like fear of consequences. So this one is more external. It's like, yeah, if you know that if you do this, something bad is going to happen to you. Whether that's like literally, if I do that and the cop sees me, then I'm busted, right? That would be one very, you know, sort of gross form of otapa, but it's like, it is still a form of otapa to know that, oh, if, you know, if I do this, something is, I'm going to get caught. So there's going to be some negative consequence. So I shouldn't do it. And like the knowing that and the acting accordingly, that is something that protects the world, right? For some people, it is just, you know, maybe the only reason that they wouldn't do something really unethical is because they're afraid that they could get caught, right? But it's also is this sort of, yeah, again, it's like taking the social structure, the basic human social structure, and making it support the path, sort of hacking what's already there in our human social systems, and for people to be like, oh, you know, if I do this, I'm going to face some social sanction for this of some sort. The other people won't like it. The other people won't approve of me if I do this. And yeah, one example, let's see, I opened up too many suttas and I don't know if I can find the right one quickly, but it's like, you know, if you are in the presence of the Buddha, if the Buddha is sitting there right there in front of you, how are you going to act? Would that be different than if you're, you know, sitting with your friend, you know, hanging out in your living room? Do you act differently then than you do when you're sitting in front of the Buddha? The living Buddha with the Sangha, you know, on the full moon night giving the Dhamma talk, you're probably going to act in a certain way. And why? Why are you going to act differently in that circumstance than you would elsewhere? Yeah, Mike?
Well, Venerable, I wasn't going to answer that question, but I have a question for you. Do you want to let somebody else answer that question?
Yeah, go ahead.
You talked about having control of the thoughts. You need to have control of your mind. Okay, how?
Right. Well, yes. So there's 3 suttas for you. They are Majjhima Nikaya 18, 19, 20, I think. There's 3 suttas on thoughts, and how you can learn to be a master of your thoughts. It involves seeing clearly and being able to recognize what's skillful and unskillful, and knowing how to, you know, feed some and abandon some and so forth. But yeah, the Buddha does give some guidance about how do we come out of unwholesome patterns of thinking. And yeah.
So Venerable, it just comes down basically to it's meditation, so I can see what's creeping into the mind and get some space between it, and then have the pause, take the pause, and decide if I want to act on things. It all comes down to meditation and seeing it, right?
It comes down to the Noble Eightfold Path. I think all of its folds are relevant. So yes, meditation, like the meditation section of the Noble Eightfold Path, the Samadhi section includes right effort, it includes right mindfulness, it includes right concentration. But right effort is defined as, abandoning the unwholesome, developing the wholesome, basically. And the other things leading up to that, like, give you guidance about how to do that. You need some wisdom to know what's wholesome or unwholesome. You need to have an intention to do what's, wholesome and not unwholesome. So that's right view, right intention. And then your right effort is applying that. And that leads to those things being cleared away. And then, then you can meditate. It's like, once you've gotten those other things out of the way, then you can have your right mindfulness and your right concentration. But the right effort is in clearing out the unwholesome and being free from that. Elaine, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about, is it a cop-out to avoid a situation because you know that it could be slippery slope? Although the situation, it's career related and it's enticing and it's got a lot of ego based with it. And I'm just thinking, I'm not in that position right now, and life is good and peaceful. And I know that if I get into that situation, it's just, there's so much, it's like going down a rabbit hole, right? I can go in with good intentions and then it'll become a little political and just like talking about TV shows and stuff like that. Like, that's not in my life right now, but if I take this position, we'll all be there again. So is it a cop out saying, okay, I know where this is going. I'm just a lay person, but I don't need to do that for livelihood, right? Thank you, Aya.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a cop-out. Like, for monastic life, so many of our rules are about forcing us to avoid situations that are going to bring us into temptation of various sorts, right? With, we just on every level, we live outside. We're going out of the household life specifically to be out of that, be out of those temptations, those things that will draw us into unwholesome kinds of patterns of attachment and aversion and whatever. And we are told, like, how can you tell where is the right place to live your monastic life? And there's various factors, like it needs to have the right kind of support. If you can't eat, then you shouldn't stay there. But it also needs to be like secluded enough that there's not some danger to your monastic life of getting pulled off track. And if you're living in a place that doesn't have the supports to get pulled off track, then it's very difficult. And we see sometimes monastics, for one reason or other, need to go back and spend time with their families for a while. I mean, not just as a short visit, but it's challenging as a monastic to go live in a typical lay environment. And if you do that for long term, then some people can do it and keep their monastic form and be solid and firm in that. But there's just, it's harder. And some people will live in that way a long time and then at some point be like, why am I a monastic if I'm living in this way, right? And so, I mean, that's from the monastic perspective. But for lay people also, you can choose how to live. You can choose where to put your energies. We can never choose entirely. We are social beings. We do have to live with each other. We do have to interact with other humans. And that's a good thing. We shouldn't, even as a monastic, we're not supposed to just go live in the cave and never talk to anybody. We're not allowed to do that either. We are going to be forced up against some things that are not, not the most supportive for us in one way or another. And then we have to train for it when we are pushed up against it. But if we have a choice to be pushed up against it or not, if we can support ourselves and live in a way that is not subjecting us to a lot of temptation and distraction, then yeah, go for that.
Thank you, Aya. That's been a real bothersome question lately. Yeah. Like, thank you.
Yeah, well, I hope it's helpful. So yeah, basically, you don't need to seek that out. It'll come anyway, and then you do have to use your practice to manage it. But yeah, you don't need to seek out situations that you know are going to have that kind of effect for you. You. Right. Yeah, so then back to this idea of otapa. Yeah. You know, one nice thing about living in a monastery is that everybody comes here and they're generally on their best behavior, at least at the start. You know, so you get to see people at their best a lot of the time. And why is that? Well, because they have some sort of idea that we're respectable and or that we're representing the Buddha. And, you know, the longer we all live together, then we all see the ways in which that's, you know, we may not be living up to every ideal, either for ourselves or, and, you know, the people who come and stay. Like you can come and be on your best behavior for 2 weeks, but at 1 month, 3 months, whatever, you know, people, it's hard to maintain that. But still, like living in a monastery, because you're surrounded with a group of people who are at least trying to practice, then it becomes easier. It becomes easier because you don't want to be out of the group, right? You want to be sort of a part of this, and you want to be a productive and you know, harmonious member of the society in which you're in. So yeah, you don't necessarily need to be in a monastery, but just wherever you are, to try to not cause harm to that environment, to those people, out of respect for them, out of concern for them, out of the fear of either the pain you can cause them or what it's going to do to you. Yeah. Okay. See a note from Ryan. Just found this, Iti Wutuka 42. This text refers to Hiri and Otapa as the bright guardians of the world. Yes. As long as these qualities exist in people's hearts, moral standards remain intact. When they wane, the world descends into violence and promiscuity. Yes, there's one sutta that says these qualities are the only reason anyone basically respects anybody else's relationships or things like that. Why don't we have adultery? Why don't we just have everybody committing sexual misconduct all the time? It's because of these. So this is a way in which they are protective. It's not the only way, though. But yeah, we have to have these qualities in ourselves. Yeah, so then I guess the thing that can be confusing about it is it can get confused with like guilt. It can get confused with the kind of toxic shame that's like, oh, I did that thing, therefore I am bad. Or remorse. You know, remorse for things done in the past is actually a hindrance. So restlessness and remorse, like a kukucha. Kukucha is remorse for the past. And so if we think that because we did something bad in the past, then like we're bad forever and we should be ashamed and we should think of ourselves poorly and so forth, then that's actually going to block us in our path. So it's not about that. It's not about self-judgment, not about self-torture and torment. It's really about developing a quality that, like, when you're in the moment and you have a choice to make, it pops up and says, you know, stop. Don't do that bad thing. that's where it's protecting you, is in the moment when you have a choice to make. That's where it comes. It's not after the fact when you're like, oh, I did so bad. But it's like, how do you develop that quality so that it pops up at that time? And of course, you will have to, it will pop up. You will make mistakes. And it is good to reflect on it afterwards and be like, oh, why did I do that? And how can I avoid doing it in the future? But the point is just to, after the fact, see, recognize what happened, acknowledge that it wasn't good, and then say, well, okay, I won't do it again. And through that reflection, through that process, that's how you develop your hiri ottappa, so that you can understand, so that it can pop up at the right time next time, so that it can like stop at that time. And if you're able to have this sense and it pops up at the right time and you stop, then that's not a negative experience, right? That's actually an experience that gives you confidence in yourself, in your ability to, well, in your own integrity. It gives you a sense of your own integrity, that you were able to, at that moment, follow your own principle of what you think is important. And then it's actually like a joyful experience in some way. So, and like, how do you capture that in the translation? And say, oh yes, shame, dread, but no, this is why they're bright qualities. The other metaphor they sometimes say for it is like touching a hot stove. We have this innate reaction that humans have, a reflex that if you touch something hot, then your hand comes off it. You don't have to think about it. It just off, done. And that's a protective reflex that humans have evolved. It keeps us from burning ourselves and having, worse problems. So there is pain. It is motivated by pain, actually. It's a very sort of quick-moving pain. You don't have to think about it. The mind just recognizes it as like, oh, okay, off. But there is pain in that. But it's protecting you from the larger pain of like, what if you hold your hand there longer and then you get third-degree burns and then, you're disabled for life because your hand is so badly injured, right? It's this sort of very quick message of like, oh, this is painful, and then you stop. And that's the kind of quality that hiri and ottappa can develop, where it just becomes sort of an automatic thing that then protects you. And because it's it's protecting your sila, or giving you the basis for sila, and so then it's also protecting others, because it means that that burning thing, like, yes, it'll hurt you, but it will also hurt others if you pick it up, right? And so it is this guardian of the world. It is what makes our social systems functional when they are, to the extent that they are. It's because we sort of have this agreement to protect each other and protect ourselves. These qualities are very much part of that. So, yeah, then the question is just, how do we continue to develop them? How do we bring them into the places where they have not yet emerged? And I think it can be done on multiple levels. It can start very gross. It can become more refined. And haven't yet seen all the ways in which I need to develop it for myself. I still have like some addictive tendencies in my mind. I like to be entertained, and the mind will seek out all sorts of, I've cut off certain kinds of entertainment, but the mind still is always looking for something. And like, what is that tendency in the mind, and how can I work with that? Or reactivity with somebody. It's like, okay, I'm not going to go punch somebody in the face, but somebody does something I don't like, I still get grumpy, and and maybe I make a face, and maybe and they can tell, right? And I want to cut that off too, or I don't like, I don't want to do what somebody told me to do, and then I'm not doing that, or these sort of these levels of things, like they can cause harm to myself and to others, and how to that's my own contemplation, is like how to bring these qualities to bear on that. And I don't know the answer yet, but something I'm considering, and that's why I wanted to look into these topics today with you. Are there any more comments here? Questions? Sharing? Daniel?
One thing I often contemplate when sort of wanting to stimulate that moral quality is, if you read the suttas, um, the ones at least where the Buddha goes through kind of the whole of the spiritual path from like one end to the other, the rather lengthy ones, it always starts with ethical behavior and moral behavior. And one really critical part of it is that once one has developed that quality, one experiences joy. And that joy becomes then foundational for everything else. And without that joy, nothing else is going to progress from there. And one thing Aya Sobina said one time that has always stuck with me is, there's, you'll have these like mindfulness meditation seminars at like corporate retreats or things like that, and people will maybe enjoy them a little bit, but you'll get a lot of like, oh, I don't know if it did anything, or I don't know if it went anywhere. And one thing she pointed out is if you don't have that basis of sila, yeah, it won't go anywhere. You're not going to develop in that way. And so if you haven't sort of put your moral universe in order, your meditation is going to fail. So I think for me, when I think about what motivates me is when you do have those experiences, when you can reflect on yourself and say, hey, yeah, I'm acting right. I didn't do that bad thing, or I did do that good thing when I had that opportunity, and really paying attention to that sense of joyfulness and saying, hey, I'd like more of that. I like this joy. And also, my meditation practice has been really deeply meaningful. And the thought that I could damage it by stepping away from sila and reduce its efficacy is a big part of what keeps me doing that. I don't want to lose that focus or that concentration or that peace of mind that I developed. So therefore, I'll be careful about what I'm doing on the other side. Anyway, just my thoughts about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, that's the Ottappa. Let's see. Anne says, I seem to often zoom in on bhikkhunis recriminating and complaining about each other. Then I get really disappointed and don't want to be around them. I tend to forget they are human too and give them a bit more slack. Probably need to pay more attention to myself. Yeah. So yes, people do disappointing things, both ourselves and others. Even bhikkhunis do. I say that from very direct personal knowledge, that bhikkhunis, including me, and not only me, do disappointing things. So then, we would like to be able to have faith that it can get better. And, as a bhikkhuni, then this is part of the pressure, is that there is social pressure to be good as a bhikkhuni, to be an exemplar, to be somebody that somebody can look up to. And, we may fail in that, but it's part of what allows us to progress, is that that there is that pressure. That's part of the ottappa, or it's part of the, hiri ottappa. It's part of the sort of sense of like, I am someone who should be respectable and worthy, and let me try my best to be that, because it's what people are looking for when they come to the monastery. They want to see somebody who has really done their practice, and so I may or may not have done it yet, but let me try, right? And this is healthy, I think. This is kind of part of what monastic life is for, is that it forces us into this, that it gives us this kind of external cause for hiri-ottappa. And then that's a benefit for us because we can actually practice with it. But yes, each of us have this responsibility that we need to do it ourselves. And it's nice if we can see others who are doing it well. But if we don't see it, then we can still do our best to do it well ourselves. We can do our practice. We do have right here our great example. Even if the living monastics are not living up to it, we at least have the Buddha, and we have the teachings, and it is possible to practice. So, but we do each need to do it ourselves, and do each need to be looking inwardly about that. And this is how the transformation happens. But it's also this sort of social network of, fear and dread that helps us do it. So, Mary Joy, you had a hand up?
Thank you, Aya. There's an instance somewhere, I think it's in the Majjhima Nikaya, but I'm not sure, where the Buddha gets fed up with the Sangha and he sends them away. So I think about that when, it's like even the Buddha didn't always, he could just like get fed up and lose it. So I wanted to offer that in seconding also what Daniel said. When you do it right, you feel joy, and then you kind of imprint and you go, okay, got it right. So yeah, but yeah, it's funny. It's really funny because like gods have to come down and go, okay, dude, I know that they were loud, but let them come back. So he calls them back by ones and twos. And he has Shariputra and Moggallana call them back by ones and twos. But yeah, even the Buddha got irritated with the Sangha.
Right. Yes. No, he certainly, well, I think the classical explanation is that he needed to teach them a lesson, and that like one of the worst punishments that you can have in monastic life is being sent away. If you're being sent away from the Sangha, that's like, well, you'd better get your stuff worked out and come back, or else that's like death of your holy life. So yeah, the Buddha would send people away, or he would go away himself, and that's when the people knew, oh, I really better fix myself up here. But yeah. Okay, yeah, the monks making a ruckus. Yes, sometimes the monks made a ruckus. There's a number of stories where the Buddha sent somebody away, or went away himself when they were having a schism. He went and lived by himself in the forest with an elephant and a monkey to take care of him, and had a lovely time while they were all fighting. And eventually they realized, oh, the Buddha left. We better work this out, and they did. They realized that the Buddha had removed himself from them because they were not having this sense of conscience, and then that inspired them in it, and it brought them back into harmony eventually. So yeah. Okay, Richard.
Thank you. I have a slightly different take on that story. That was very, very early in the Buddha's teaching, because Sariputta and Mahamoggallana had come at that early time, and then they went back to their teacher and they brought his 500 students back with them to learn from the Buddha. But they hadn't taught them anything, not even the decorum of how to be a monastic in the Buddha's presence. So, so the Buddha said, because where they brought them was where the initial monastics with the Buddha were living, assembling in that area. Okay. And so it wasn't just disturbing the Buddha, it would have been disturbing the whole atmosphere. So he sends them away, but then he talks to Sariputta and Mahamoggallana, and he says, okay, now, what would you do if I decided to go into retreat? so that I wasn't here available, basically what he's saying, to teach these newcomers. And Sariputta said, oh, we would follow your example and do the same thing. He said, no, that's not it. And then Mahamoggallana says, oh, we would teach the new disciples. They say, yes, that's it. So what he was doing is saying, you know, you're arahants already. You don't have to bring them to me to get instruction necessarily, not that they can't come here and you know, that I can't instruct them, but you also need to now in your position, take responsibility. And of the 500, 250 returned back to the original teacher, but 250 stayed on, and they very quickly became arahants. And this is how the Buddha then designated Sariputta and Mahamoggallana as his chief disciples, because the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. You know, here's two disciples who assisted 250 people to become arahants, right, in this very early time of the Buddha's teaching. And so that's when the Buddha, at the same time, after that, he goes down and he converts the 1,000 fire worshipping ascetic Brahmins. And then he comes back to, can't think of the name, but the main city there of King Bimbisara. And then Sariputta and Mahamoggallana bring their 250 arahants. And when he sees them coming and he sees the result of what they've done, that's when he declares, oh, here comes my two chief disciples. They will be my two chief disciples. And that becomes that meeting of 1,250 arahants, which is like a special holiday in Thailand and other countries, you know, that are Buddhist, you know, and that's where that assembly of, you know, I have 1,250, you know, arahants in my assembly. In other words, this is the early assembly. This is how quickly he was able to, you know, develop that many arahants, over 1,300 arahants in less than a year's period. So I unfortunately, the stories are kind of like separated a little bit by suttas. It's not a continuous flow. You have to read all these different suttas and then think, oh, wait a minute, is this connected with that? Is that connected with this? And then you can see the flow and how these things, you know, all went together. Anyways, that's my opinion, but thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, well, I think basically the Buddha was a good teacher. The reason he was a good teacher is that he would be tough with people sometimes, and that he also made people take responsibility. So like you said, with Mahamoggallana and Venerable Sariputta, they needed to take responsibility for their, you know, these other monks, and the other monks needed to take responsibility for themselves. And you know, the Buddha said, you know, he could offer what he could offer, but eventually, ultimately, it's for each one to do themselves. And the fact that he could get that many to do it, that's what was the special quality of the Buddha, as opposed to just any awakened one, is that he could teach that. He could lay it out in a way that others could understand and pass on and realize themselves. So we have come towards the end of our time here. But thank you everyone for joining us. Morana. Let's see. Well, I was hoping at the end, actually, we went on with our discussion. I was going to raise a question of like, what we want these programs to look like going forward. Now that we're out of winter retreat, I'm sort of looking towards the spring and designing a curriculum of sort of what we should be looking at next. And I am interested in feedback from those who are regularly joining the group about what kind of topics you would like to be covering, if there's any sort of anything that would be of interest to you, more inspiring than what we're doing now, or particular topics or ideas. We welcome feedback about those things. And I think we're out of time now for discussion, but if you'd like to email us or message us or anything like that. One idea we've had is doing something like a Buddhism 101, kind of a progressive, like just introducing the core concepts week after week, in which case this actually kind of fits into that. This is one of those things at the start of the gradual training, is this conscience and prudence, and that might be one thing that we could look at. But if there's other things that people are interested in, please, we welcome feedback and ideas. And we will be announcing something about that soon, by next week. By next week, we'll know what we're doing next week. Anyway, for this time together, I'd like to dedicate the merits of our Dhamma discussion and our practice in whatever way that's showing up in our lives. We dedicate the merits of that for our own well-being, for the well-being of those around us, and for the continuing of this possibility of awakening in the world for ourselves and for others. May it be so. Idang no punyang asawakayo hotu. Idang no punyang magapalanyanasa hotu. Idang no punyang nibbanasapachayo hotu. We can pay our respects to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha together. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagawa Buddhang Bhagawantang Abhiwademi. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami.